Hey guys, today I just wanted to give a little insight on the Holley carburetor and some of the functions of it and some of the things that I've found out through tuning and making mistakes and figuring out problems, and maybe some of my problems that I've figured out can help you solve your problems faster. And then I will also go over a little bit of some of the ideas behind open hole and 4-hole spacers and the heights, 1, 2, 3, 4 inch spacers. You know, just quick little stuff like that, and hopefully some of this information will help you. I've seen a lot of questions and answers on blog sites, and some things should be some good information, and there's a lot of stuff on these blog sites that make things more difficult and could get you into trouble. So hopefully I can clarify some of this stuff. See if this works out. This is a 3310 Holley 780. I got this off of I actually bought a old boat from a guy just for the carburetor, and for like 50 bucks or something. But it's a nice carburetor. I had already rebuilt it, so I'm going to take it apart and go over power valves with you, and I'll show you some neat stuff that I found out. And then I'll drop it off of this vise. This is an older one, of course, and it doesn't have power valve blowout protection like the newer ones do. This thing's probably from the 70s at least, I believe. And but I did put a kit in it that can protect the power valve, or give it a better chance of saving it. If you have a backfire, the pressure will come through the port in the bottom of the carburetor or through the ventry and blow out the power valve. And I'll show you where that's located. And here's the bowl. These are cathedral bowls, they call them, big bowls. These are really nice, hold more fuel. Most everything has these on them now anyways. Here's the metering block. This is the primary side. This has a power valve only on the primary side, and idle speed screws only on the primary side. It's designed to be facing forwards, that is why, so you have a left and a right. This is the just a baffle to keep fuel from coming up, splashing up and coming out. An old trick that guys used to do was take these two float bowl vents. You could run a tube between the two and put a hole in the top of it, or run them up higher, keep fuel from sloshing out. Of course, the major vacuum port here, and then it had a small one on the side for a distributor. You have ported and manifold vacuum on some carburetors. These are the blue gaskets. These are really nice. They're very soft, and they are reusable, and they do actually work well. This is a 6.5 power valve. I wanted to kind of go over what I found with these things, and maybe this will be helpful. I had new carburetors on my 52 Plymouth here, the Slug, and going through these, and I found out something really interesting. See, this is a 6.5. This is brand new. Look how easy that moves. It's a little stiff. It's brand new, but this carb's been sitting on the shelf here for a few years. So what we do, so what I have is my Mighty Vac. It's for a brake bleeder, but it does pull vacuum, so you can use it for anything. And I happen to have this little rubber cup thing in the kit, which is pretty neat. So I was able to put this, the carburetor does, there's a port right here in the bottom of this carburetor, right there, and it comes straight out right there. So manifold vacuum feeds right into there, right into that port in this sealed little cup area, pulls on the back side of this diaphragm, closes the front, so fuel can't flow from the bowl through here, out through these side vents here, into this metering block in these tiny little holes right here. So fuel will go through this, out these sides, into this little bowl here that's sealed with this paper O-ring or composite O-ring into the bowls here, and it comes up through the ports in here and out into the ventry. So what I'll do is I'll just check vacuum on this, being that it's a 6.5, and it is an older one, so it's slightly stiff, but it's not blown. See, if you look at it, it's supposed to close at 6.5 inches of vacuum, right? There's 5 right there and 10. And I'm watching it. See, it closed perfectly. Right at 6 inches, 6.5 inches. That's a really good one, and it's sealed. It's working great. Now check this out. See, all these power valves should be very flexible, especially at low vacuum. You know, you can't have, I notice you can have a stiff power valve. See how soft that feels, that looks? That's another 6.5. Oop, right there, about 6 inches, 6, 7, off just a hair, but it, you know, there's always, but you can see it start to close at 6. Here is a 3.5, very nice and soft. Not a lot of distance. Look how there's not a lot of room. So it feels awfully tight, and you can usually tell the power valves are adjusted at the factory. This rod here is threaded, and then this piece here is screwed down and Loctited in place from the factory, and they must test it, and then they lock these into place where they're supposed to be at the precise vacuum number, 6.5 and 3.5. You can see one is slightly more than the other, screwed down just a hair more. This one's a 3.5. Standard flow. They do make these in a high flow, but those are typically for alcohol cars. You really don't want to mess with that, unless you just want to try it and kind of see what it does for you. See that one open? Yep, right about 3.5. You'll see it start moving, but it doesn't open very far. Look at this right there. You can see how much movement is there, and then you look at this one, not much. I would think that would, it's a tapered seat, that could hinder flow. It doesn't really pull that diaphragm all the way back up like it should. So this one here is kind of leery, even though it's brand new. And I saw a blog once where a guy claimed that they put 2 gaskets on his power valve, but that may not be true. What it is, these gaskets are pretty thick. When you unscrew them, they split in half perfectly. That's one gasket. And you can put it back together just fine like this, and you just snug it up. Don't need to over tighten it or anything. Just snug, put them back together in there, and it'll be fine. Now here's some old ones I had that are really old and dried out. Now look how hard that is, where it actually pops. That diaphragm is really tough. Doesn't even want to close. I know none of these are blown, not one of these. There we go. Yep, look at that. 10, 11 inches of vacuum on that one before it closes. And that's a 3.5. That's no good. And I got a couple others the same way. This one's really old. You can hardly even push that down. Let's try this one. You see it start moving. See, it just really doesn't even hardly want to close without 15 inches of vacuum on it. 15, 20, almost 20 on a 6.5. So my thought is, even if you have power valves in your carburetor and it's been running for years, and you see kind of an odd rich condition while cruising, power valves typically are to help with cruising around town and that sort of thing, because you're able to decrease the size of the primary jets probably like 6-8 sizes down with the power valve. The power valve can up the amount of fuel almost 6 to 8 jet sizes. That's why sometimes on the secondaries you don't see a power valve, because it doesn't matter. When you're into your power curve, you want full jetting anyways. You don't necessarily need a power valve on the secondary. Usually they get blocked off. And this is a power valve blocking plug. You can buy these. It's just a plug that screws right in the end of this thing with the gasket, just like a regular power valve. And now you have no fuel flow through the orifices here. And then you would typically, that's why the secondaries, the jets, are 6 to 8 sizes larger than the primaries on most carburetors, somewhere in that range, because there is no power valve. This carburetor does have a metering block in it. Sometimes they just have a plate. It's got a block in it, but it's just like this with it plugged. So yeah, so that's it for the power valves. So you want to just take a look at them. Make sure that they open and close very easy to the touch, and that they feel good before you even put them in. It doesn't hurt to just check them out. And just any old vacuum deal like this will give you an idea of how they work. So these ones that are stiff, I would just get rid of. Throw those things out. And you can reuse these gaskets. I've reused them and they're fine. The green gaskets are the best ones to get. These are for your accelerator pump. This is a 30cc. This is a 50. You see the difference. They get more volume. This is usually if you have really huge squirters, these things that sit up here that squirt fuel into the venturi. These have numbers on them, and you can get these in bigger sizes. There's a size that Holley recommends, and I think it's if you get over 35 or something like that size. This is you got 1,000 horse engines. It's like the old 400 horse back in the 80s, you know. It's nuts, the technology going on now. But I'm a carburetor guy, and it's fun to kind of learn this stuff and figure it out on your own. And you know, it'd be too easy for me to go to fuel injection. Although it's been proven many times, and don't hate me on this, that carburetors can get more power the same as any fuel injection setup. It's just fuel injection is a little more tuner friendly, not so much hands-on. Being tuner friendly in that way, and then you know, startability, cold drivability, that kind of thing. Maybe mileage, hard to say, but if you're really good with this and you take your time with it, you got a good AFR gauge, which is pretty nice to have these days. It'd be crazy not to have one. You can still read the plugs. AFR gauge will give you an idea of what the plug should look like, and I can show you a plug here. I keep various plugs. I prefer the Autolites. I've had a couple champions in 2 different sets on 2 different occasions. The porcelain came apart inside the engine and blew it through the engine, and one of them got stuck in the valve. So I'm kind of done with champion. And I've seen guys, even with the motorcycles, high compression motorcycles, the champions would blow the porcelain right out the top, and it'd be a wide open plug. But here's one, an Autolite, and I was running a different carburetor setup. I have a set of Predators. I'll go over that another time. And it's good to keep these slightly on the rich side for a blown motor, definitely, which would be below a 12.5 or so. This one definitely runs rich. You see the black soot around the edge. You definitely don't want the black soot on the porcelain, or you know it's just off the charts rich. It's probably bubbling at low speed, kind of like a weird gurgling sound when you get on the throttle. And they sound pretty mean, but they just don't run very well that way. They're not crisp. But yeah, once that porcelain starts cleaning up, you see the red haze on it. That can have a lot to do with additives that are in the fuel, nothing to do with the real firing of the plug. You like to, for heat range, somewhere around the middle of the strap, you'll see a discolor come down around the middle, give you an idea on heat range, and even spark advance can kind of show you if it's in the right range, about where that strap is getting hot. Sometimes it's hard to see by the naked eye. You need something really high-powered magnifying glass to see that. But the porcelain can be a nice, healthy brown color. A little bit of black around the edge is okay. Typically it should be like 3/4 of the way around, but it's okay all the way around, like a light soot. are a very light color. This one's a little better. It's dark around the edge. We see the porcelain still clear. I see the strap is actually kind of clean most of the way down, so it's off a hair. Could be heat range. Yeah, exactly. This is a 26, and I either run 29s or 26s. I guess this 26 is a hot plug. I run the hot plugs on the street, two sizes hotter on the street because it does run rich, especially at low speeds. Superchargers can do that. At the drag strip, I'll run 29s in it, the 3929. I have the Edelbrock RPM heads on this, and because I'm running wide open throttle, I want to keep the plugs cool so there's no possible another issue for detonation possibly. I just want to relieve anything that can happen. There's not a lot of idling around, so a colder plug would be okay. You want the spark plugs themselves, heat range isn't for power. It's the spark plug's ability to clean themselves. So I run the hotter plug on the street with it running richer so it can clean itself, and it'll clean all the soot off of itself, at least around the porcelain. You can't do much around the edges. Porcelain and the strap. The colder plug, if this thing ran rich enough, like this one right here, it could, if this was 2 heat ranges colder, it could have fouled the plug. You get random misfire or multiple misfires, or it just won't fire at all, and you can have engine problems from that. You don't want that. These things cost too much to be skimping on something like this. So all these spark plugs, there's a lot of good ones out there. This one's just standard, no platinum, iridium, none of that kind of stuff, just a standard plug. They work great. I run 30,000 scap with, right now I'm only running 6 psi of boost right now. I'm running it underdriven. I have another pulley where I can run to 1-to-1 and up the boost a little bit, but I like to play it safe with this because this is still a street car, and I like to, you know, go on cruises with it and stuff like that too. And just keep it around 800-900 horse. I don't want to get too crazy with it by today's standards. And yeah, I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, so that's that for the spark plugs. So what else I wanted to show you was, oh, and carb spacers. So you have an open hole spacer and you have a 4-hole spacer. There are reasons for one or the other. It depends on your manifold, which one works best for you, or your whole setup. Everything is based on your engine setup. One can work great on one 350 engine with a different manifold, and one can work better on the other, or vice versa. Basically, I usually run the open holes, but if you have a short manifold, it's like a low rise, when the fuel comes in, it'll come right out the bottom and have to make a sharp turn right down the runner. You can always benefit from a spacer, at least 1 inch. If you can get away with it, it'll smooth that transition. As the fuel comes down, it'll smooth it around instead of making a sharp turn into the runners, and it can flow a little nicer, a little better, and you can pick up a little more power. Plus with the plastic spacers or the wooden ones, well, even the aluminum ones, they all can release and protect the carburetor from too much heat. Plastic ones are proven to work. I've seen wooden ones, I've never used them before, but I've used the plastic ones, they work great. Aluminum ones seem to work great too. You don't have a lot of problems with Holleys because the bowls are on the end. With getting too hot or percolating typically, it's the Edelbrock carbs where the bowls are in the base that you can have problems with sometimes. But depending on where you live, you know, here in California, it's usually not a problem on anything anyways, where I live. The weather's always pretty cool, and, you know, you're not cruising the countryside in these things like they used to do back in the 60s and 70s, you know. But then I want to go over this thing. So what I got here, it's a 520 cubic inch Chrysler big block, 871 blower. I have 4-inch risers on it. Basically, those were just so I can get the air filter and carburetor up just above the roof line for looks as well. It kind of goes with the idea with the car. So I put those on there. They worked out well because they release a lot of heat. These things will ice up like crazy and really cool the intake mixture. Blowers typically they like a little wetness coming in, fuel on the top. It keeps the blower rotors lubricated. So you'll see some guys, when they run these big blowers, root style blowers with fuel injection, they'll run injectors on top and on the bottom. That way they're getting fuel coming in and it cools down the charge and it lubricates the rotors, keeps them clean, and it's just a great idea. Now these were, like I said, these were 950s. What I had on here before, when I first got these things, I had these babies on there. Where are they? Here's part of one. These are Predator carbs, and I'll do another some more story on carburetors and stuff, and I'll go over these Predators and some of the other carbs. And they perform really well, but they're crazy rich on the street. These are more like drag race carburetors. I had these. So what I had with these was I had the foam taken out of the top. So when I put these on, I took this off, which I usually run. I just have handmade filters inside. They're just screening material until I come up with something better. And they kind of help hold it on there. But I took the foam out of the top. I put these on there. The idea is if you run a carburetor with no filter, no base or anything on the bottom of it, the air rushing over the top of it can pull fuel back out the other direction. And it can't atomize right, and you'll get a disturbance in velocity of it. So you always want to run some type of an air cleaner on it so that the area inside of it can calm down and pull down into the engine like it's supposed to. You got high speed and low speed going on in here. That's the deal. I think my problem was being that the engine's in the wrong place. When I had these on there without the filters in it, air coming over the top of them, even though they were shielded up to here, it's probably still enough to get low speed turbulence in here. And it was causing a distribution problem that the faster I went, the harder it had pulling fuel in, especially when the secondaries kicked in. Even around town though, it surprised me. Doing like 20 miles an hour, it was already causing a problem. They ran lean all the time. I was checking fuel pressure, I had a gauge on it. See, 99 power valves were the biggest ones in the kit. I had 99s in the rear. I had like 88s in the front, both of them. I had the power valves unplugged. Mine are boost reference, so they're external vacuum lines. So I can just unplug them and they'll stay wide open. I try to get it as rich as I could till I can get down the street and stomp on it and see what it would do. I had the fuel pressure up to 10 psi, which is a little much for carburetors. And still would run lean. I mean off the charts lean. And stumble and pop, which you knew right away. If it pops out the exhaust when you let off gas, you're running lean. You got a problem. If it burbles at low speed when you get on the gas and it says blah, 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 like that kind of as you're going, it's way too rich. You want it crisp and smooth. 28, then you should go with the 50cc pump. You don't need it with a small one necessarily. You can have it, it doesn't really matter. But also when you have a 50cc pump, when you buy the cam kit, there's 2 or 3 cams in there. I forget the colors, maybe a brown and yellow or something like that. They're made for the 50cc pump. If you use these smaller ones that are made for the 30cc pump that come in the kit, they won't actuate the 50cc pump like it's supposed to, and vice versa. If you put the big one for the 50 with the 30cc pump, you could rupture the diaphragm. Then you have these. These things are like little rubber check valves. They go in the diaphragm for the accelerator pump. See right here. Inside here, you'll usually see it sticking up. You'll see the end of it sticking out through here. But this sits down in that pump so that it can pull fuel in but not push it out. Sometimes if you rebuild a carb and this gets knocked out of there or comes apart, you'll have a hard time storing fuel in that accelerator pump, and it won't. won't work. So if it's not working, you can check to make sure this thing still is in there and it's working like it should. Now what I installed on this carburetor was a blowout protection kit. It's a little BB that's installed. You got to do a little drilling. It's been a while, but being that that port goes through here, down through here, the BB would have to be in here somewhere. So I think I took this plate off, and you had to drill out or something and put the little BB in there so that if air blew through here, the BB would jam up against the seat and keep air from blowing into this chamber and blowing that back of that valve apart. Pretty simple idea. It may or may not work all the time. It's hard to say, but it's better not having one at all. All of these new carbs have that stuff in them already. Let's see what else we got here. We got, let me see. You know, work on carburetors doesn't hurt to have a nice magnifying glass or even one that's lighted. Here's my jets. I have 2 of these kits. And the jets here, they're numbered. And they have numbers on the side of the jets. That's where you need that magnifying glass sometimes. And what number is that? That's an 85, so that goes back right there. Anyway, in that jet, oops, let me do this. Here's a jet installation tool from Holley. This is very nice. It's easier on the jets than using a screwdriver. And the jets go right into this metering block right here. Pretty easy to do. And then you have, make sure all these orifice spots here are clean. You also have to do very minor trimming. Basically, when you get the carburetor, just mess with the primary, secondary jets. Just start there. If you get a stumble or anything like that, you could need a little more accelerator pump. You can buy the cam kit, and they will just change the curve of the fuel. If you actually need more fuel, then you can get bigger squirters, and if they're really big, then you need the 50cc pump kit. For mild cars, a lot of that's not necessary. These are the air bleeds on this carburetor. They're not removable. A lot of the older vintage carbs and lower price carbs, they're fixed. So here's, and I think somebody's been in here at one time drilling these things. But here's one. You got a high speed and a low speed jet. And they supply air into the fuel mixture to help emulsify. And they can lean or richen the fuel curve and do minor trimming of it in the mid between low and high speed. Sometimes they can affect a little bit of the high speed and low speed along with the middle range as well. I've seen that happen myself. I got Holley 950 HPs on my slug here. I just put these babies on here. This is a 52 Plymouth. I call it slug, and I went through all kinds of adjustments on these things, playing around with the jets and stuff, because I had different air cleaners on this that I found out later on were causing a problem with this thing. The fuel coming in was too turbulent, or the air coming in, it was too turbulent, and it couldn't, the air in the ventries had some kind of a swirl or a problem going on. It was running crazy lean, and I put this back on there, the problem was solved. So I put these carburetors back to stock the way they were, 2 jet sizes down on the primary, boom, perfect, right out of the box. Leave the air bleeds the way they were and everything. Air bleeds, definitely, if you want to get a little picky with it, which is fine, because how can you learn unless you don't just try something? So what I've got a couple kits of these air bleeds. See, they're really tiny. On these carburetors, guys, back in the day, they would drill these, and I'll show you this neat kit I have. Of course, I can't find the kit now, but they're tiny little hand little drill bits, and they're measured drill bits, and I bought mine off of Amazon, and they're like jeweler's drill bits, and you can just kind of put them in and kind of work them and drill these ports out. But you got to be careful. You go too big, you can't go back. Or you can drill the brass out altogether, and you can make your own, have them threaded, and make your own removable air bleeds. But that's usually not recommended unless you got a really good AF gauge or a dyno or something handy. It's hard to wing something like that. So what we had here was, see, that's a 99. The largest that they have is a 99. So I think I pretty well covered that, I hope. But on this one here, I had already milled the choke horn off of it and everything like that. This carburetor runs really nice. It's a really good carburetor. They're kind of somewhat sought after, the 3310s. And yeah, so when you put the, actually I'll leave that power valve out. I'll just put the plug in it right now. Actually, I'll leave everything out. And yeah, you just got to snug them up. And don't hit these sideways. They have pins on here that locate them. And of course the pins are broken, so at one time they must have got tapped on to get them loose and it broke the pins off. They'll still work, you just got to center them a little bit. But I was pretty amazed. The Holley 950s or HPs is what I have, and they're really good carburetors. They're kind of a hybrid carburetor. There's a lot of guys online and stuff that have complaints or thoughts or issues with them or about them or questions. The 950 is not really the CFM it pulls necessarily, but it's just a number that's given to it. It's a 750 main body and 850 butterflies on it, butterfly plate. So they flow about 850 roughly. And if you got a blow-through setup or something like that, or a supercharger, they can flow more because that thing's going to pull a lot more air or push more air than what they're rated at and force it through. But so far they seem to work really well on there. I haven't been to the track yet. I'm hoping to go the end of this month if everything pans out. It's been raining and so nasty here. This is what they call a single feed carburetor. It's just got a small line that runs between the two bowls and just a single line coming in. Very simple deal, works very well. Not too much stuff sticking off of it. And then I'll show you the carburetors I have on my deal. Oh, I also wanted to go over this. Once again, if you're messing with an older carburetor, float level can affect fuel trim as well. You want the float level to be correct, where it's supposed to be, the middle, somewhere in the middle of the float screw. The float, sometimes the metering can rely on the weight of the fuel in the bowl. Remember, the weight of the fuel has a lot to do with the fuel system as well, even in the fuel line sometimes. So you want it at the correct level. If it's too low, you could have a lean condition going on. If it's running really rich, it could be too full and spilling out of the top or forcing itself out more than it should. So you want that at the right level. Then you also have your float set up as well for your pintle valve to turn the float on and off. And you want a high flow valve. Some of these newer carbs have high flow valves in them too. So these new carbs that you buy, like the HPs, the XPs, even other brands that are very similar, a lot of them have a lot of neat updates on them that you would have to go in and change. But this is all these high flow pieces and stuff. The cars that we're building today make so much more power than they used to 20 years ago. That some of these things are needed now because, man, the fuel that's flowing through these systems is insane. You know. So anyway, so I don't know what made me do it, but all of a sudden I was like, I tried everything. I kept going back to stock and then adding jets. I changed the metering, the orifice for the high-speed, low-speed jets. So I got real familiar with how they work and worked out pretty well as a learning procedure. But I finally when I had these on, I put these screens back in. I thought these were too restrictive, which they are for this thing. But I put the foam back in, and all of a sudden, everything was perfect. Now it was too rich, on the rich side. So I've been messing with the jets. They have 80s and 86s. These are blower carburetors. They're designed to run in pairs for an A71 blower from Holley, so they should be pretty close. It did have 10.5 power valves in it, where they're designed to run anything at idle over 10.5 inches of vacuum. This car only runs at 7 inches of vacuum in drive at idle. So I put a set of 3.5s in it. You want roughly half of the vacuum at idle or close to it. So put 3.5s in it, cured that problem, and 30 cc accelerator pumps. You got 2 of them, or 4 of them, because these are double pumpers, which is plenty. You don't need 50s on this thing. So 80s and 86s on the jets. So I'm down to 78s on the primaries and 88s on the secondaries to make up for that dip on the primary side. And I think that's going to be perfect. It's going to be just fine. And then if I want to, so I got my low speed is about 13-to-1 at idle and stuff, which is perfect. And then high speed, I want 12.5 to 13 because I run methanol injection on this thing, and the methanol is actually a fuel. It's 50-50 water methanol, and it will richen it up some more. So I'll use that to take up another half a point. But if something goes wrong with it, I'm still okay in the 12 range. I won't blow this thing up. Yeah, so I got the methanol and the carburetor set up now, and everything should be pretty close. And that was quite a find on that. Took me a long time to get it right. Let me show you these power valves on this thing. So these are them here. These little standoffs right here. So I have a vacuum source below the supercharger, so I get full manifold vacuum, and then the power valves operate like they're supposed to. You'll always have vacuum above the supercharger, and you don't want that. They'll never open. You want it below the supercharger, and then the valves will open when the vacuum drops off. And then here's my methanol injection and my fuel lines that I made for it. Now I'd like to go over some other stuff at another time. We'll get into the Predator carbs and some of my, I'll put out some carburetors. I have some spread bore carburetors. I have some Edelbrock carburetors, and of course the Predators. I even have an alcohol Predator. Yeah, they're all really neat carburetors. I like the Edelbrocks, but they won't be able to keep up. I've had them on my other 55. Just one 750, and it works great. Top end seemed to be okay, air fuel ratio wise. Accelerator pumps are kind of the problem with those things I found. When you start, building 500 horse or so or close to it, they seem to be lacking. You can't get them to pump enough fuel in to get a lean spot. And sometimes if you get a lean spot in your transition phase with the secondaries, if it's too long, then the carburetor can't keep up and it will stay lean, or you'll get it for too long a period of time, and that's when you can get detonation right there. You want that lean spot to be 0 if as quick as you can possibly get it, to be there and gone as fast as you can. 0 would be better. Keep it rich for a second if you can. But so yeah, I think that's about it.